Okay, so this is tutorial 7. Set up a new building in Costex. I've named it Warehouse 7 to go with tutorial 7. First thing we need to do is import in the drawings that you would have exported in your last tutorial from Revit. Import in the DWFX drawings rather than the IFC drawings. So top left here, drawings. You can do this in the home tab as well. Add drawing. Go to where you save that. It'll just be one file rather than a number of files representing the sheets. So click that, click open, and we're going to import in all these sheets. So to do that, hold down Control on your keyboard and click all 8 drawings. You can only import 8 drawings or 8 views into Costex at any one time, or at least the educational version of Costex at any one time. So we've got 8 there, and we're going to click OK. So here we have them here in the drawing view. You can categorize that like those drawings like we did in the 2D tutorials previously. To navigate this drawing, kind of similar to Revit, a little bit simpler actually, because we don't have the actual wheel, navigation wheel. But if you push down on the left click mouse button and hold it down, you can orbit that drawing and spin it. Release it, kind of spin it around if need be. Push down on the mouse wheel and you can pan it up and down, left, right. And then the mouse wheel itself, if you push it in or wheel it out, you'll zoom in and zoom out. Up here in the top right hand corner is essentially a kind of a box wheel. If you click on any aspect of that box, you can also navigate the drawing. So if I want to see the kind of top corner as such, I can do that. If I want to see kind of an elevation, I can click on front, back, sides, etc. Another kind of useful aspect or viewing tool in Costex is the E key. So if I press down on my E key and hold it on my keyboard, and I push the mouse forward, now not the mouse wheel, just the mouse itself, I just push it forward, I can actually go through that 3D model. If I release and zoom in and zoom out, I can kind of spin it like I would if it was in full view, and look up and down and maybe zoom in on a detail of that particular model. To come back out again, I can click reset view or push down on the E key and just go backwards with your mouse. Just beside the drawing tab here, there's a layers tab. Just take a quick look at that. Kind of similar to 2D drawings, or at least DWG drawings, CAD drawings. We've got layers that you can turn off and turn on. You can do that by, I suppose, unchecking here in the checkbox on the long left hand side, or you can do it by clicking on the layer in the viewport. So if I click on those columns will disappear and they'll be unchecked over here on the left hand side. To show all the layers again, up here in the layers tab in the drawings, I suppose, ribbon, you click show all and all those layers will be turned back on. So again, as I said, you can click off on the viewport, or you can click it by clicking the little checkbox here on the left hand side. So I'm going to click show all. Also, and this is quite important in terms of navigating the drawing, and the functionality that I most use is this model tab. Now this is the model tree, and this naming convention here, based on folders and I suppose subfolders, and even right down to the actual items, is based on the naming conventions that come in from Revit. Because it's a DWFX file, and a DWFX file is an export from is a native export from Revit, that naming convention is based on the Revit structure. So if I want to see an aspect of that, I can click on the folder and I'll see just the floors, or I can get right down to the actual item in those folders. For example, in the folder, floor, and then maybe the ground floor, I can click that. If I want to see a door, drawings, doors, internal doors, the size of internal doors, and then that one door. Now there's 2 doors in that 910 by 2110 millimeter, I suppose, category. To click back the entire model again, I would click drawings, If I want to see a couple of different items together, let's say for example I want to see my foundations, so I click my foundations, both my piles and my wall foundations there within that. I can just click the piles if I want, but I'm going to click structural foundations, and I'm going to hold down the control key and click the structural framing and maybe the columns. So there we have a number of different folders in the tree selected together, and it's kind of a nice way to, I suppose, create views. If I want to save that view, up here in the display category in the drawings tab, I can click save view and maybe call it structure. Okay, click insert. So in the views tab here, I have a saved view called structure. If for example I've clicked on anything else, there's my drawings tab, the entire folder, or the entire model. Click views, double click the structure, and there essentially is what I had saved. Another good thing to note here, if I want to see the kind of background building to this, I don't want it in essentially in full view, but I want to see it with kind of what they call here a ghost view. What I can do is I can click the ghost view icon up here, and I'll see it kind of transparent building there. Now that might necessarily be handy in this particular instance, but let's say for example there's two plumbing fixtures, and let's take the doors. Okay, they're kind of in the sky as such there. I can't really tell exactly where they are. If I click ghost view, I can get a better feel for those few doors that are up on the first floor and those doors and plumbing fixtures which are on the ground floor. So moving on from that, to get back to the full view, the drawings folder, I can collapse it and expand different aspects of that folder structure, or again, as I said, I can get right down to the unit if need be. So I'm going to click drawing. I'm going to maybe turn off the ghost view. Now, another very important part of the kind of BIM model structure in Costex is the schedule. So I'm going to click dimensions, and in the BIM part of this dimensions ribbon, I'm going to click schedule. And what happens is essentially I see the view of the model and the schedule. Now what the schedule is a representation of every object in that model. So I can see if I scroll up or scroll down, that's a representation of every single object. Kind of spanning left and right there in that schedule, I have a lot of different columns, and I have the rows. The rows represent the object, and the column represents the object properties. So I can show the entire schedule for everything that's viewed there, I suppose the entire model, or I can select, let's say for example, I select the structural foundations, I maybe just take the pile caps, I will just see those 8 piles. And everything along the top then is the object properties that you would have seen on the left hand side of that Revit, of the Revit model in Revit, kind of comes in here in a kind of a schedule format. Now that schedule is quite useful when I'm constructing model maps, which you'll see later on, because I'll use the object properties in the model maps to construct how I'm going to output my quantities. Before you do any sort of quantification, it's good to check that there's units of measurement against your dimensions. So the dimensions that we used here, and you'll see them in the fields, would be area, although I won't see an area there, but let me just click the entire drawing. Okay, so I'm going to scroll across, there's an area field there, scroll down. I can see the area has a meter squared, but if I didn't see meter squared there, I would have to designate that as an area. To do that, I would right click on the actual title of that column. I would click unit at the top, and I would click area, and that looks like it's meter squared, so I would click square meters. Okay, I don't have to do that because it's in against it. So anything that should have a dimension against it, I'm going to scroll across here. I can see that everything has millimeters in terms of a length measurement, and scroll across maybe and see if things like width have millimeters against it. It does. And I should see volume in there somewhere. I do, meters cubed. So it looks like they all have a unit measure against them. If I didn't, I'd follow that same thing that I did previously. Volume might be unit, volume, and then that's cubic meters, wherever that is. there, cubic meters. Now the reason they all have units against them is because, if you can remember from our last tutorial, we actually went into the project units and we actually designated them as 3 decimal places, cubic meters, or meters squared, or millimeters, depending on whether it's a length, a volume, or an area. So that's all good, and that shows the kind of advantage of doing a bit of pre-processing in Revit, but it can be done here. So I'm just going to click back on the drawing. To close the schedule, I just click the schedule and maybe go back to my drawings tab. Okay, I'm going to bring in some building information modeling quantities. What's going to happen here is I'm going to do a BIM dump, or at least what I call a BIM dump. So I'm going to extract every quantity that's in that model based on the naming conventions here in the model tree. And that, as I said before, comes in from the DWFX file, which is based on the Revit categories, family and type names. So click back on drawings, click import in the dimensions ribbon, click import dimensions using BIM template. And I've got a number of different templates here I'm going to use, or could use. I'm going to use the BIM import Revit general because I'm going to import those quantities based on that Revit naming convention. And I'm going to click it and click open. Now before I do that, just maybe draw your attention to the fact that where these BIM templates are located, they're located in the program files, Windows directory or C directory, program data, exactl, costx, BIM template. So you might have to actually go and find those by clicking through those folders. So just make a note of that. So again, click and click open. Now it's going to run a kind of calculation structure. It might throw up a little bit of an error there, but click OK. And what you have down here is an automated takeoff of the model tree, but now I've got quantities against them. Okay, so click any one of those little pluses to expand the folders, and just maybe select the structural foundations, just to note that I've got 13 meters cubed of pile caps. I've got 4, 9 and 3 meters cubed of different types of strip footings. Now again, as I said, that's coming in based on that model tree folder, and you can see that if I hover over any one of those items, I got a few secondary quantities in there. Now I don't have things like reinforcement, I don't have things like formwork. That is something I might add using other modes of measurement, but it's a kind of a quick and simple way of extracting quantities from that BIM model. Also, I might show you a way of categorizing that. I like to, when I bring in that BIM dump as such, put it in a folder called BIM dump. Now this may take a little bit of time, but it's worth doing because I may be extracting quantities in a few different modes, and subsequently I'm able to go back to my BIM dump and note that all those, I suppose, folders or dimensions and subfolders are in that BIM dump folder. So to do that, I'm going to click maybe the first one. So I've got 3 doors there. Double click the actual dimension, or you can right click it, edit dimension group. In the folder here, type in BIM dump. Keep it always in the same case, from item to item, / click update. Okay, so now you'll notice that I have BIM dump. That doors folder, which was essentially on its own, now is going in as a subfolder, and that one item that I changed is gone in under that doors subfolder. Okay, so to put these 2 items in that subfolder in the BIM dump folder, I might hold down and click Control, highlight both items, right click, change folder. Now I need to have the folder set up already, so I'm going to click drop down and BIM dump doors, click OK. And you can see that those 2 have gone in there. Moving on to floors, right click if you're doing it for the first time, edit dimension group, and I'm going to put BIM dump / click update. And then my last one, I can right click that, change folder, BIM dump floors, click OK. So go through that, or through every item there, or every dimension in those folders, and put them in the BIM dump folder. So the last number of items for the walls, right click, edit dimension group. Again, as I said, type BIM dump, has to be in the same case, update, and then click all those other walls. And because you've already set that folder up as BIM Dump /walls, I can right click, change folder, drop down, it should be at the very bottom. There it is there, walls, click OK. So now what you have is essentially a BIM Dump folder, and you'll notice that all those items that were folders got in as subfolders. If I scroll down, and there's my walls down the very bottom. So I can collapse that entire folder, and all I have there is a BIM Dump and the standard that comes defaulted. You can use to measure the GFA. I'm going to leave that one there for the moment, but I can delete it if I don't need it. Something else to note here, because I selected rooms to be exported, if you can remember from our last tutorial, when we exported the DWFX file, we clicked on rooms to be exported. You'll see the room quantity in there. So if I click that, I'll see under rooms actually all the rooms and all the quants that are associated with that rooms. That is because the rooms are available in that model tree. If you didn't select that in the export process in Revit, you would not see that model tree there with the different rooms. Thus, it wouldn't come in terms of quantities. Rather than bring every quantity in the model in through the BIM import template, I'm going to select a couple of different items here that I just want to see, or I just want to see as quantity. So I don't want every quantity. To do that, click back my model tree, and I'm going to select some of the substructure items. Let's say, for example, the structural foundations. Click those. Click walls, basic walls, and hold down your control key and select the rising walls. Maybe scroll back up and take your ground floor slab. So it's kind of equivalent to the substructure elements in our National Standard Building Elements. Click back on drawings. Now you will have your BIM dump in there, and that's fine. I'm just showing you an example what you can do when you just select a number of different views or different items in view and just import those items. So click import dimensions using BIM template. It tells me that some objects are hidden, and that's fine. I actually only want to bring in the ones that are on view, and click yes. Do the same thing, look for that BIM import Revit general. You might have to go through these different folders to get them or get it, and click open. And now it's just imported in those items that I have just selected, rather than every item in the model. Okay, I'm back to the building where I had my BIM dump folder and my subfolders in it. And I want to isolate a dimension here. So I want to see, for example, my structural foundations. So I'm going to just click the plus there. Now I want to see all those dimensions in the structural foundations folder. So I can right click the folder name and click isolate folder. Now I zoomed in a little bit too much, so I'm going to just zoom out. So every dimension in that folder will come up. If I want to just see the, let's say for example, this 900 strip footings, again right click the name and isolate the dimension group. Now where's that gone? Again, it was zoomed in a little bit too much. So I've got 9 meters cubed there based on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quants, or at least what looks like 6 quants. To see the makeup of that dimension, similar to what I showed you in the 2D, click the 2D tutorials, click dimensions, and I can see I've got 4 dimensions there. So the first one actually has 2 dimensions grouped together, so has the next one, and then I've got 2 isolated dimensions there. It just depends on the way it's drawn. There is a number of different items in here. I've got the quantity, which is in volume. I've also got some area item, a height item, a weight item, and the length item. Now I can turn off or turn on the columns that are available there by clicking this little snowflake in the top left hand corner of this dimensions tab. So if I click that, I see that there's nothing in the area because there's no objects associated with that, so it may turn that off. Same with height, there's nothing in that, so I'll turn that off. And in fact, there's nothing in weight either. So really all I have here is a length and a volume. So I'm just going to click out of that. Now I just want to pay attention to the actual quantity. This is where I might validate some of these quantities just to double check and make sure everything is okay. So let's say, for example, look at that one there, 1.46. Which one is that? It turns blue as I click it. And I'm just going to click a little measure distance here, drawings, tab, measure distance, and click, come across to the other side, 5.228. But that's not essentially what is shown here. It's showing at 7.58. So there's something not correct there. What's happening, I think, is that the length is being taken from the edge along with adding the width and maybe even the height to calculate that 7.58. So BIM doesn't know that I'm really just looking for the length of that foundation. So you just got to be careful with kind of BIM dimensions and maybe just validate one or two quantities. The volume, as it turns out, is okay. So if I was to measure the width across there over 900 millimeters or 914, take the depth 300 millimeters, multiply those out, I would actually get a quantity of 1.46. So the volume is correct, but the length measurement isn't. So I just got to bear that in mind. So I'm just going to click back on my dimensions group. I'm going to show you another way of carrying out BIM quantity takeoff. This way a little bit more manually done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the quantities of those strip foundations manually. So I'm going to click back in my model tree and click my entire wall foundations and click back then on my drawing. So that will include obviously the 3 different strip footings there, but once I click that wall foundations folder, they should all display. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to collapse that BIM dump and maybe just click on that standard folder for the moment, so there's no highlighted kind of ghost view of the actual entire BIM dump folder there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to right click on one of these quants here. Doesn't really matter which one. So maybe the strip footing here, I'm going to right click on it. And in that, I suppose what comes up there, just below object properties, there's a create dimension group here. So I'm going to click that. And I'm going to create a dimension group. It's not automated in terms of what comes in from the BIM import template. I'm going to name it strip footing, and I'm going to put it in a folder. I'm going to call it object mode measurement because that's essentially what I'm doing, just to differentiate it from the BIM dump. So object mode / and I'm going to put it in a folder called footings or foundations. Okay, so name strip footings, object mode foundations. I'm going to measurement type, it's going to be measured as volume and it'll be displayed as a volume. The weight measurement, unit of measurement here, I'm going to click that as tons, and I'm actually going to, in custom name, put in true length here, or maybe even alternative length. Okay, and that's to be measured in meters. So that's kind of the setup, similar enough to how I did this in a 2D dimension, but that's the setup of my BIM dimension. In the BIM dimensions tab, click that. Now there's a number of fields here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these, or at least what is there. This is no longer applicable, so I'm just going to get rid of those. I'm going to start with the length field here. So I'm in BIM dimensions. I'm going to map these fields to BIM properties. So I'm going to click the little 3 dots here to the right hand side of the field, and I'm going to scroll across here and I see the properties tab. So I'm going to click that. So I can see that there's some dimensions here, and in terms of dimensions in those BIM objects, that's all that's there. So you don't see an area and you don't see a height dimension, unfortunately, in there. If they were available, we could use them, but we can't in this case. So I'm going to click the length because that's essentially what's there. Double click it. It'll go up there in the actual field itself in brackets, and click close. So that length mapped to the length properties of our BIM model is in there. In terms of, I'll come back to area. I won't use wall area. I click volume because this is pretty much low hanging fruit for me. I'm going to click that one. In the properties tab, I do note that there is a volume measurement there, so we can just double click that. So I'm mapping our volume quantity to our volume field, and I'm going to close that. I'm also going to use this volume in my weight category. So I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste it in there. But in this weight field, I'm going to multiply it by 150 kg, so volume times 150 kg per meter cubed. And then I'm going to multiply it by 0.001 to change it from kg to ton, so 1000 kg in a ton. What I'm also going to do is in the area, I'm going to copy that volume. I'm going to go back up into the area. And I'm going to divide it by, if you remember when we actually checked the height of these strip foundations, they were 0.305. I'm actually going to divide it by 0.305. So the volume divided by its thickness will give me my area. So I'm just going to leave that as is. And in the true length, I am going to take the area and I'm going to divide it by, and if I just click the little dot here, I'm going to divide the property that's in there. I actually do have a width. In fact, it's gone in the wrong area. If I just take it from there, cut it out, paste it in there. So volume divided by 305, which is the height. If I had a height property in there, I would just put it in. And divided by width. I have the width property, so I can use that there. So close that down. So that should get me a true length. I'll be able to compare that maybe against the length that is in there in terms of properties, and we did notice that that was incorrect, so maybe hopefully that's the right one. And once I'm happy with those dimensions, I'm going to click insert. So now I have object mode, foundation, strip footing, and I can basically click on these. So I'm going to start with that one, click, and then I'm going to measure these dimensions. So they'll kind of highlight green. Looks like they're all green now and they've all been measured. And if I come across here, I can see 16 meters cubed. If I hover over it, I'll see a number of, I suppose, secondary quantities, an area 52.42, a true length of 58.56. And notice the difference between the true length of 58.56 and the length of 77.76. So what I might do here is just do a couple of manual checks. Not that I necessarily need to do this, but I'm just going to show you, or at least get comfortable with the fact that this is accurate takeoff. So I'm actually going to do some 3D point mode measurement. So clicking dimensions, add dimension group. I will maybe do an area check on the strip footings. And I'll actually leave it in object mode measurement, measured as an area. Actually put a default height in there at 0.305, and I'm going to click insert. I'm going to click from object mode here to point mode, similar enough to how we did it in 2D, and I'm actually going to go and measure the surface area of these dimensions. So maybe starting with this one. Once I'm in point mode, I give it a little dot there, click, 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 and then back on the first point, click enter. So that's my first area as such. Maybe this one here, I could do click, 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 moving my way around. Ooh. Might have to zoom in and zoom out, and then back on my first dimension. Maybe click a negative here and take out this gap here. Show both. So I'm going to go ahead and finish off the rest in terms of measurement of those quants. And then the last one gives me a total area of 42.46 and a volume of 16 meters cubed. So if I check what I measured there, my strip footing, object mode measurement, I get an area of 42.42. So slight, tiny bit of a difference, and I can be fairly confident that strip footing measurement is actually correct in terms of object mode. I might just double check something else here. I might check the length. I have a true length there, 58.56. So let me check if that is correct. So again, dimensions, add dimension group, true length, check, strip footing, and to put it in the folder, object mode foundations, measure it as a length, maybe change the color, and click insert. Again, in point mode, quite simply, just register the length of these foundations. Again, a bit of a fast forward there while I did that off the video, and register my last length. So that's some sort of a representation of the length of my foundations, my strip foundations. And you see there it's coming up as 58.11, or rounded down to 58 meters. If I hover over that, I can see that my true length calculation there was 58.56. But so based on that strip footing, that object mode measurement, using the BIM fields, I got a fairly accurate representation of those quantities, or I got a real accurate representation of those quantities with some checks. Now, the checks are probably over elaborate there. I might just need to check one or two quantities or one or two dimensions within those overall quantities, but you can see that you should be pretty much happy with that there. So I'm going to now measure my pad foundations. To highlight the pad foundations like we've done before, click the model tree, click on the pile foundations, and then just go back to your drawings tab. I might just click the standard folder, so all I see then essentially is my pile caps without the kind of highlighted BIM model in the background. Any one of these pile caps I can click on, so I might click on this corner one, and I'm going to create a dimension group, pad foundations. In the folder, because I've already created a folder called Object Mode Foundations, it's available to me. The volume, and well, it's already displayed as a volume as well, so I'm going to measure it as a volume and display it as a volume. And I might change the color to, let's say, navy. And my unit of measurement down here I'm going to set as tons, so I'm looking for the tonnage. Click BIM dimensions like we've done before and delete the fields that are defaulted in there. And I'm going to start with my length field. So I'm actually looking for the perimeter of the foundation here. So I'm going to click the BIM properties, the tab that's on the right hand side, and see what kind of dimensions are available. I can see that my length and my width dimensions are available here. So I'm going to select the length, and I'm going to add the length and double click on the width. So take those two properties, add it together, times 2. Click close, and that will give me my length measurement, or at least my perimeter measurement around the foundation. The area measurement, I don't have, clicking on properties, I don't have an area object property here, but I can take the length and I can multiply it by my width. And that essentially is my area. The volume, I'll leave the wall area. The volume, clicking on the properties, is an object property, so I can take that and map that volume field to my object property for volume. Click close, and then in the weight column, click copy, paste it into my weight, or go and carry it out like we've done before with the 3 little dots. But the copy paste function is a nice quick way of doing it rather than doing it again. I'm going to multiply my volume times 150 kg times 0.001 to convert to tons. So 150 kg per meter cubed of concrete, and that is, at least for the moment, all I need to do. I'm going to click insert. So now I'm going to go ahead and measure these dimensions. So as I did before with the strip footings, I can go and just point and click, or I can right click on a dimension, import objects in, and select either, this is depending on how the model tree is set up, but I can either select that one dimension, that one pile cap, or I can select the 8 pile caps in that model tree, or I can select it with the strip foundations. So that would include the strip foundations and the pad foundations. But I'm looking for the pads, and I can see that there's an 8 number beside them, which corresponds with the 8 number I'm looking at. And I'm going to click that. So automatically it's imported those 8 pads into my pad foundations. Just hover over it there. I have a volume 12.96. Again, I have an area 25.92. I have a total length and I have a weight. If I want to see the breakup of that, I should see, I'm just going to pull that up, I should see 8 dimensions. Again, if I want to click the little snowflake in the top left hand corner and I want to have a look at, I suppose, volume, I want to have a look at area in there as well, and maybe I want to have a look at weight if it's available. Okay, so I'll see those dimensions down there with area, volume, weight. So that is essentially my first video in BIM measurement. I will be moving on to model maps in the next tutorial.